Hey, it's Chris, the supply chain doctor and host of Supply Chain is Boring. This is part 2 of a 2-part interview with the supply chain technology company whisperer, Greg Cronin. In part 1, we discussed how Mr. Cronin got into the supply chain space and the impact he has had. In this part 2 interview, Mr. Cronin comes out of retirement again and is excited about the supply chain technology market potential over the next 5 years. It all sounds pretty boring, so let's see if Greg can prove me wrong.
I'm back to playing golf again. And then I did that for about a year and I said, okay, I'm bored. And then this industry just started to take off. Everything changed. From the day of when I was back in the McHugh Freeman days, it was ship to store. It was pallet case. Maybe did a little split case. What really changed the world was e-commerce, each picking, and all the complications around that. And that's really how Intelligrated grew so greatly, was because this ship-to-store pallet case world is now shifted to, yes, you had that, but you also had now eaches to the store, which really wasn't that way before. And now the handling characteristics of that and the software tracking of that had changed everything. And then you started to get into the automation all around that. And so that's really has excited me even more. So I ended up I started to get involved with investment firms looking at various companies. One of the ones that I was part of was AutoStore. I saw AutoStore when I was at Intelligrated. We, along with Swisslog, implemented at a customer Medline. And I saw AutoStore technology in action. I loved it. I could see that's something that for goods to operator and each picking, it was an exciting technology, very reliable, high speed. So I joined their advisory board. I became an investor, and we thought, it would be 3 or 4 years before it would go to its next level, but it came out with a new product line where it could do bigger and heavier products, and it just took off, and then they became very popular, and then they were acquired by T.H. Lee. From there, my name got out there, and now I'm actively involved with a lot of different investment firms evaluating technology in this space to either invest or to merge it with someone else or to buy the IP or whatever it might be. And from that, I got involved with another company out of Pittsburgh, out of Carnegie Mellon, called IM Robotics. Wonderful team, great technology. They have 2 products. They have a mobile robot called Swift that is a picking technology, has an arm and picks like a person would. And then they also have an AMR that does conveyance of product throughout the warehouse, and which is becoming more and more prevalent now. There is a real desire that conveyors are such fixed position and they take up so much room, and they might fit in a ship-to-store world, but they don't necessarily fit in a ship-to-consumer world. And there's a lot more flexibility needed. And so robots have become something I love now. I really, and so I'm still active with other investment firms, but I'm also very active with IM. I'm also working with a number of other material handling companies as an advisor. One is True, former Intelligrated people, and helping them with their strategy around their software and where do they take that next, and how do they get that into this world of the new world of automation that's coming up, especially robotics. And as I mentioned to you earlier, I'm not ready to make clay pots just yet. I really enjoy what I'm doing, and I really feel this space right now is the most exciting it's ever been. And this, I go back to 1970. So yeah. That's 50 years. I've never seen it like it is right now.
I didn't realize that. You sound like the software technology whisperer. I mean, if somebody wants to know what to do with this, they ask you.
I couldn't do a line of code if you paid me to do a line.
Well, that's what I was curious. You said, these companies.
No, what I do is I'll bring people in that know how to do a line of code or look at the architecture. The way the software is today, it's you have the WMS, and now at Intelligrated, we were one of the first, and we worked with actually Gartner to help come up with the name WES, Warehouse Execution System. I do believe that is the future because so much automation is going into sites now, and they're all islands. And you'll have an ASRist over here, and you'll have some sort of other slotting technology over here, and you'll have a robot over here, and they're all different work cells. It's almost becoming more like a manufacturing operation than it is a distribution operation because of e-commerce. You could be kitting, or you could be over packaging something for custom there's various work and tasks that you can do that warehouses, fulfillment centers never really had to do before in the past. And so there's a lot of that going on. And also the trend now of how the big warehouses of the past, the 2 million square feet that I've seen, that you could actually see the curvature of the earth in it, I believe, to sort of the micro fulfillment centers that you see that are emerging today, you really need a different type of automation, one that's very dense, one that can fit in a very tight space, as well as the software that can drive the automation, drive the speed, that can work with the speed of the automation is such a critical factor nowadays. So that's sort of what I know. I know how that can fit together with automation. So software with automation, warehouse control systems were, created mainly by the manufacturers of the automation so that they could integrate with a WMS. Never successfully. They were always, the WMS is a relational database, and it's not fast enough to deal with the speed of automation for the most part. So that's why they built a WCS. But now a WES is emerging, and that is really, and with artificial intelligence, you can put reasoning and logic in it. It can make decisions, and it can make decisions at the speed of automation that a human can't do. So that whole world is opening up of AI, not only in the automation itself, but the software that's around it. And that's the only way you're going to get all this high speed and you're going to get the value of the automation, is you really need to have all this technology surrounding it to make it work efficiently. That's what I do. I like looking at that. I like to figure out where they are in that chart, in that scale, and where they need to go, and the type of people they need to hire, and the type of technology that they might have to introduce into their company. So I find that really a lot of fun. So
yeah, it's interesting. Well, I also took notes. You've kind of came through all ranks of the supply chain, or different ranks. You started with the execution side, right? WMS specifically, moving boxes around, getting them picked, and then you migrated into visibility, right?
Right.
Which is still, it's a key part, but that's a different than execution. And then
well,
now you're into robotics.
I know people said, "Oh, you're so creative. You came up." Well, part of it was I had a really I couldn't continue in WMS space. I signed.
Oh, okay.
So I decided, there are other ways I can go. I sort of took the idea of real-time, extending real-time more globally, taking the idea of a WMS and making the world as your oyster type of thing, and expanding it that way. I did get in to these other places. The beer one, for instance, like TrendStar, was interesting because I had to deal with all the beer guys, and they are professional drinkers, so there's no doubt about it. But it was interesting in their world that all of a sudden we created a whole new dimension for them, because for decades the beer guys would deliver their keg to a pub or a bar, and then they'd pick up the empty, and they never thought of pooling with competitors or the delivery and pickup, and utilizing and looking at the keg as not so much as part of their business anymore, but something that they can rent. So it was a very different model, and it was exciting to kind of do things like that were different models. You know, software as a service. When I was at Descartes, we were one of the first ones that did that. And that was a big, bold step for Art Mesher to do that, because it required giving up a lot of money that would normally be in a project that you get paid for up front, or during the project, you get paid for over time. Well, the timing of the revenue coming in the door is so different in that regard. So there's a lot of risk. So I have to give Art Mesher a lot of credit, because he had the nerve to do that. You know, there are a lot of, I've worked with a lot of brilliant guys in this industry, you know, Alan DeBerry being another, that were creative minds that came up with different concepts that worked. Mm-hmm. And they were usually different business models, but you know, it was, so being around guys like that, you know, some of that rubbed off. And then I've been fortunate enough to work with some really great teams at different companies, like the one I'm working at right now with IM Robotics. I really love this team. Really great bunch of people, all young. I mean, they all look at me like, you know, grandpa, but they know I've been around the block enough. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they listen to me most of the time. So I just enjoy this role of sort of being a mentor in a way, because I've been mentored myself in the past. You know, it's kind of and my kids, my children work in the business. My daughter worked Intelligrated as proposal manager. My son works at DHL Technologies. And so they're in the space, and I enjoy that they're in the space. Because I think this is the greatest time to be in this space right now, with the change now, COVID coming, and what does that mean? You know, because the people would say, you know, I'd sit at big meetings with big companies, and they'd say, well, let's cut out the labor, and then now there's so much available labor, and people are saying, well, you know, why a robot? But the labor is different. I mean, it's labor that young people today do not want to work in warehouses and distribution centers. And they have other things that probably much better that they could do. And with the COVID and the new social distancing and the way this world, I think, is going to evolve, is you really need to have automation really take over even more so, just for the health and safety of people that work in these environments. So yes, labor can probably be cheaper, unfortunately, but it's still this need to make things go faster and to have safety and social distancing now. So the world has emerged in a different way, but it's also strengthening the need for innovative thought and automation, and what's the best automation that fits in this new world.
Something that I picked up on you, I mean, it's obvious that smart people bring you in for a reason, but you seem to have the ability to build a team. Is that something you would say is a characteristic? I mean,
yes.
I mean, you know, I mean, you said it. You said it a couple of times. I heard it through there. You bring in the right people.
I love building teams, and I've been part of some great ones. And yeah, I do. It's funny. I was at a trade show a couple of years ago, and we're standing there, and I was with this guy, and he goes, you know, half the people here at one time work with you. And I go, yeah, I guess so. And at least they haven't thrown me out yet. But sure. I do enjoy, there have been a couple of companies, Velocity was one. I hired the all-stars of the industry. And unfortunately, if it wasn't for the dot-com bubble burst, that company would have been really something else. But it was in the right place at the right time. Unfortunately, it wasn't in the right environment, and I had the right team. I had Mo Trebuchet and Jeff Cashman, and I had some really industry leaders that worked there. John Kierkegaard. I could name people that have all gone on and become famous and run companies themselves today. And the same thing I could say at Intelligrated. I had a number of people at Intelligrated Mike Barker, who is now at Swisslog, and I have a number of people that are heading up competitors to Intelligrated, Honeywell Intelligrated, and I've been fortunate to be able to recruit right and develop real great relationships with these people, and they've become friends. And because when you go through thick and thin together, you develop a great relationship.
Yeah, you mentioned Jeff Cashman. When you said Velocity, that's somebody I know. We've interviewed him a couple of times, and he's running a company now. I don't know if you're affiliated with them.
Oh, sure. No, I know them. I've not, but I do know them quite well. And I think they're doing well out there. So,
yeah.
Well, they've got perfect technology, good operator technology, and that's that's the direction everybody is going. And so Jeff's in the right place right now.
Well, Greg, I know you've got some other things to be taken care of besides talking to me. I appreciate it. But before I go, there's one thing I like to conclude with is for anybody that's listening, maybe get your perspective on, maybe somebody going to college thinking about supply chain as a career, coming out of college, where should they go, or even making a transition into supply chain management. Do you have any perspective on I think it's going to be robotics, but I want to get your perspective.
Well, it's software too.
Okay.
It's software is really what makes the robotics smart, and in the end. But it is, and e-commerce has really changed everything as well. It used to be the buyer when I was selling, it was operations guy and it was industrial engineer, usually came up through those ranks. Now you're selling to a lot of times the e-commerce people, and they come from an entirely different world, and they're very tech savvy. So the industry itself has gone from this mechanical world to more of a digital transformation, information, data crunching world that is very different and has a lot of different people that are very, I call them extra lobers, the people that have that intelligence, that artificial intelligence is becoming, it's going to dominate in this industry. So it's not just industrial engineers coming in and maybe computer science people, but it's really mathematicians and scientists and roboticists, but it's also in the marketing and the sales of this, because in the business, how robot as a service, like software as a service, and there are different business models. So business analysts and financial people are now coming into this industry, which I never really saw before. So it's a much wider range of skill sets in the industry now than there was when I started. And usually you could tell somebody they usually came from one or two disciplines. Now it's across the board. And it's exciting times, as I said. I think there's going to be a major transformation, and it's our world now is driving that, of how people buy and how they take things home, or they have it delivered to their home. And all those cycles and all those things that are taking place is significant change. And I think we've just seen the start of it. I really believe, when I first got into robotics, everybody thought, well, that's just going to play out really fast. Well, it didn't play out that fast. I mean, if you remember the Jetsons, they had Rosie the robot, the maid in the French office, and you'd think, well, why haven't they created something like that real fast? Well, they haven't. I mean, they probably could, but it would cost probably $3 or $4 million, and it still wouldn't do all what Rosie could do. But who's going to pay for a $3 or $4 million robot? So not a number of them anyway. And so it had to be field proven, tested, reliable. It had to be come out at the right price point. And though that is finally getting here, we're at the point right now that technology, the convergence of centering and vision and all of the other things that make up a robot, software, the price points are there, never before, and that's even going to become more so. And that's going to change, I think, everything. So it's an evolution that's speeding up so fast now. It's just amazing how I think where it's going to go. I think the next 5 years are going to be the biggest change in supply chain technology than there's ever been before. And, and I didn't even say that 5 years ago because I didn't think we were quite there yet. Some of these things just need time to develop. But I think because of the nature of our times, things are going to get developed a lot faster. This is the era right now. A lot of companies aren't buying right now because they're not open fully. And I've noticed at the times before in the past, like when the dot-com bubble burst, technology companies came together. They started to merge. They started to share data, to share IP. And I see that happening now like never before. So this is a great opportunity for people to come in here because the guarded days of, this is our IP and this is how we're going to do it is evaporating. And I think you see more and more companies really willing to share and work together in order to get that technology to the next level. I've never seen the cooperation that there is going on right now, and it's due to COVID. But I think that's going to continue. I don't know how much longer. But because of this, you're going to see a spurt. As we did back then when the dot-com bubble burst, the creativity after that was enormous, and I think you're going to see the same thing here. So if you're going to enter this space, this is the time to do it. And you can come at it from a different background than you would normally expect in the supply chain.
My theory is supply chain is boring, Greg, but you may have proved me wrong. So congratulations.
Well, it came from the old box kicker, mentality to now the extra loavers, so it's a different, you're finding a different class of people in this space now.
It is.
You used to see. And I welcome it because I think it only brings on more innovation and more excitement. And that's what I'm saying. I can't retire. They're going to have to drag me out of here because I still enjoy it. And I think anybody who enters this space, like my children did, and they love it. They're really excited about this space. I don't see them leaving. They can see where this could head. And so I encourage anybody, if they're considering, I just recently talked to someone young who was a brilliant mathematician, and he was thinking, going off to other higher tech type of callings. And I had a conversation with him, and he goes, and I said, you make your mark faster here than you would working for one of these big guys because you're just going to get lost in the numbers. Here you could really make a difference. And so I got him, and has a nice job, and he's doing AI at a company, robotics company. So I just think this is, and I'm glad I chose this years ago. I sort of chose me in a way, but I just gone full cycle now, and I've just enjoyed my time here.
Well, I mentioned, I think you have an ability to build teams. I think I can see why people enjoy being around you. You're a very smart person. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Well, I don't know about that, but it's experience. The one good thing I have is my memory. So, well, if I lose that, I'm in real trouble. But it does, because it's interesting because I remember when the dot-com bubble burst and other times of financial and technical times of troubles, and people came together and innovated together. And I saw that was going to happen here. And I started to lead the parade a little bit with some others, and we've been in the background kind of cheering people on. And it is really happening now. So I'm very excited about that. And I think that's going to continue, and that's going to really accelerate the change, the evolution of what's going on here.
Well, great. Greg, any last comments before we wrap?
No, I'm glad to join you. Anytime you want me back, I would be happy to talk to you about any part of my career or where I see it's going. I think what you're doing is the right thing, because I encourage people to get into this industry because I really believe we're just at the start of something really new and big.
Well, thanks again for investing time with me.
Thank you, Chris.
If you're interested in CSCP or other APICS credentials, there is a YouTube video where you can learn more about bootcamp-style workshops at Georgia Tech. Search on APICS Bootcamp Courses Informational Webinar. If you're in the North Georgia, North Alabama, Chattanooga area, check out the traditional class formats offered by the University of Tennessee Chattanooga Center for Professional Education, Supply Chain Academy. Optionally, we can bring supply chain certification workshops to your company. Just send a note to chris@apicscoach.com. Supply Chain Boring is part of the Supply Chain Now network. We try to highlight historical events, companies, and people in supply chain management and create a picture of where the industry is headed. Interested in learning more about supply chain technology startups, mergers, acquisitions, and how companies evolve? Take a listen to Tequila Sunrise, crafted by Greg White. Or check out This Week in Business History with Supply Chain News' own Scott Luton to learn more about everyday things you may take for granted and pick up short stories you can use as general conversation starters. The Logistics with a Purpose series puts a spotlight on neat and interesting organizations who are working toward a greater cause. And finally, if you're interested in logistics, freight, and transportation, take a listen to the new series, Jamin Logistics and Transportation Experience, with the Adapt and Thrive Mindset Sherpa, Jamin Alvarez. If interested in sponsoring this show or others on Supply Chain Now, send a note to chris@supplychainnowradio.com. And remember, supply chain is boring.
When I worked at Mitsui, even though it wasn't in engineering, it was but how they ran the business. And it was teams. It was all around teams. And even I was the lowest member of the team. I had a say. And you had to sign off. Actually, we had stamps. And I had Cronin in Japanese character. And I love that concept. And I've kept that everywhere I went, because you always had to make everyone feel that they were part of a decision, even though it might go against what they want. I learned a lot from the Japanese, the way they looked at the business, and it mostly was how you managed and how you manage people and how you manage process. They were very, very process oriented.
Yep.
We developed procedures and policies that I've adopted that all my life. Right now, I'm president of my golf club, and one of the things we're doing is I'm changing all their policies and procedures and bylaws, and they're antiquated. They're not worth the paper they're on, and that early Japanese training was really helpful to me in making me aware of that you should have backups, you should have redundancy, you should make people part of the team. A very team-oriented. I embrace that, and I've done that ever since. So you're right. I mean, the lean is just that's changed manufacturing, and that lean has gone into the warehouse and distribution centers.
Yeah.
And to great results. You know, the efficiencies have just picked up significantly. So it's you can learn a lot, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to get into international. And I've done a lot of international business. Every company I work for, I started their international side of it. And I really think we can learn a lot. I mean, I was just at AutoStore, and I work mostly with their product management group in Norway. Brilliant guys. I've never saw product management work more effectively than what they did. And I learned something from how they did that. How product management really drove a lot of what they did and what they built in the next generation. You hardly ever see that. I mean, usually product management is like, some guy everybody ignores, or a gal somebody ignores. And they really drove that company, and they built out, because they were completely different. What they liked about me was I was anti everything they did. They didn't sell, they didn't have a direct sales force. They sold everything through resellers. They didn't make money selling support or maintenance. They did it. They did everything completely different. They broke all the rules, and they had a plan and a strategy and product management that did it, and they executed on it. It was just brilliant. So you learn something every day.
Yeah, well,